Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all to this wonderful talk by Ms. Diana Kurkova from Bulgaria on the topic of Agile risk management in Agile. Let me first give you a brief of what Agile PK is being doing since 2014. Agile Development Society was established in 2014 by a few of the guys in Islamabad, Pakistan. The society is aimed towards giving back society what the professionals have learned over the years in the domain of agile. Society is involved in uh, at national level, Lahore, Karachi, and Islamabad. There are three chapters. I'm heading the Lahore chapter. If we summarize the activities of the chapters and national, we have a series of webinars that each chapter do quarterly and monthly. In addition to that, there is a linkage with industry to bring in industry professionals from local um, companies to share the knowledge on the platform. Then we have national conference that is being conducted every year. Um, in addition to that, there are many training programs that are at the academic level and at the professional level that is carried out across the chapters. Uh, this is the brief of what the society has been doing from last 5 6 years. Now, let me introduce today's uh, speaker, Miss Diana Kirkova. She is from Bulgaria and has got 10 years plus years of IT project management experience, with 5 years of experience in strategy management and 6 years of experience in software development. She's been passionately spent her career moving up the ladder from software developer to product manager and to enterprise transformation agile coach. Currently, she spent most of her time coaching companies interested in transforming their culture, advancing their development practices, and applying agile values and principles. In her current position as an enterprise transformational coach, agile coach, she is providing ongoing coaching, mentorship within the organization. She helps teams use agile methodology as strategic assets to deliver value for the customers. She has unique ability to provide you with the right tools and techniques tailored to the needs of the organization. This is the brief of what Miss Diana has done over last 10 plus years. Now I'm giving the control to Miss Diana for today's wonderful presentation on risk management in Agile. Uh, Over to you, Miss Diana.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here with you. We met before in other events, so I guess I might maybe know some of you, maybe not, but I'm really happy to meet you today. So today we will be talking about the risk management and how the risk management is not only in the waterfall projects. It's not only in the way that we've been used to have in the past, because as it was announced, in the beginning of my career I started as a developer, but then I transformed to a project manager. And then the agile comes to my life later. So I transformed to a product owner, and then to a coach, team coach, executive now coach on the different levels, not only on the team levels. and scaling little by little. So working in the beginning from with small teams, with Scrum teams, with Kanban teams, with teams working in other frameworks, agile frameworks. Now I'm working in Amadeus, which is going through this agile transformation, and we're implementing SAFe as a scaled framework, scaled methodology to organize teams of teams. So in this, but during all of this travel that I did in my career, the risk management was one of the hot topics, because you know that when risk occurs, it is sometimes something very, very important, and we have issues on production or we're losing money. So we need to have this discussed. So I hope that today we have this 1 hour to discuss it, and I hope that it won't be just me talking. I kindly ask you to help me to go through the presentation. I will be asking you to participate in some of the slides, so it won't be just me talking and you being bored on the background. But let's learn by each other. Let's share some experiences here and there. Of course, I have a slides here prepared that will lead us through the discussion. I will share with you the slides later, so you will be able to find me. No need to have more presentations on me. So let's start. I introduced the topic. I introduced that there are different ways of working, and one of the different ways was the waterfall process that I've been experiencing a few years, for some years. And then is also the agile frameworks that came to our life lately. So here on this picture, if we're thinking from the perspective of the risk, what kind of analysis you guys can do? Can you help me? When do you think that risk occurs, and when do you think the risk topic comes in our life? Of course, I have a hint on the slide for the waterfall that maybe we discuss more the risk. We're looking more about what kind of risks they may happen more in the analysis and design phase. But what then will be the difference with the agile? Can someone help me?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Someone was unmuted, probably willing to help.
Your presentation. Have you shared your presentation yet?
Yes. Isn't it shared?
I can't see your presentation.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Can you see my screen now? Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can see now.
Perfect. So what I was talking about is on the top right side here, which is the waterfall process, that it goes from the moment when we get the requirements, then we have the analysis phase, then we have the design phase, then we have implementation and testing, and everything goes follows the previous one. So each step cannot be started before the previous step was finished. So this is a representation of the waterfall process that we focus on the risk, and we are looking for risk and risk analysis during the first steps of the waterfall process, where we're doing the analysis and the design of what we will be developing, what we will be doing. But on the left side, under the line, is the cycle that usually doesn't matter in which framework you're using. Of course, more in the Scrum when you have cycles, but even if you're using, for example, Kanban, because lately we see that a lot of teams are not using only Scrum, they're using Kanban, or they're using Scrumban, some middle solutions. Anyway, they have some iterations that they're like check-in points, and the iterations are contained by 4 steps. First, we plan. then we do the work, then we check, and then we adjust. So this is the iteration that we have in the agile frameworks. So what do you think when we're thinking about risks in the agile? In which step? Can someone help me to answer this question? If not, maybe I can continue. The answer is that we're looking for the risks during all of the steps. We're not looking only in the plan and when we're doing the work, but we're looking for risks and analyzing risks in all of the steps. And the beauty of the iterative approach that we have is that it is in really small steps that we're able to check and to adjust our processes in often occasion. So if there is something, we need to adapt how we're doing the things. So we're working in small iterations. But ideally, we're talking about risk on each iteration, and we will see more in details in later of this presentation. Just a few more slides to talk about the difference between waterfall and agile, but in general, I do not consider that it is needed for me to convince you that maybe for the current environment, for the current situation that we are experiencing in our life and in our work life, is more needed to maybe to implement agile than waterfall. But just to give you the hypothesis of Henrik Nieberg, I probably you already heard about it, is that we want to please the customers in an early stage, because at the moment we are talking about business value and what is the value that we're bringing to the customers. So this leads you to the question how we can bring customer business value to the customer in earlier stages. So in the first slide, because there is another one, it is represented the waterfall approach, where we're doing the work in steps, one after another. But not thinking from the perspective how to bring value on each step, but just cutting the work in pieces to make sure that at the end we bring the whole functionality that we've been promising in the beginning. So here in the beginning, we promised to the customer that we will deliver a car. And we cut the work in 4 steps. So in the first step, which is maybe in a month, we deliver 1 wheel. In the second month, maybe we deliver the two wheels or the 4 wheels and the structure that holds them. In the third month, we probably also deliver the body of the car, but without the rule, we cannot drive the car. So it is still something that the customer cannot use, and the customer is still not happy because there is nothing that brings him or her value. And then on the 4th month, we assemble the whole car with all of the parts that we already built, and we deliver this to the customer, and the customer finally becomes happier. So in the agile world, we do not want to focus so much of the delivering the car, because the requirement actually is that we would like to deliver something that will allow the customer to move through the city, to be able to drive, because he wants to go somewhere, he or she. So in the first iteration, we are wondering what kind of business value could bring to the customer, and maybe we're giving them a skateboard. So it might appear that some of the customers are not able to drive the skateboard, and they give us the feedback that probably they're falling down because there is nothing that they can hold. So on the 2nd month, we add to the skateboard place where they can put their hands and hold, so they're not able to fall, and they're not so unhappy, but they're still not happy enough, because they want to go further, not just around the block. So in the 3rd iteration, on the 3rd month, we deliver to the customer a bicycle. So each iteration improves the solution that we have, but we give to the customer frequently something that they can use. So on the third month, imagine that we can give them a bicycle and they become really happy, they can use it, they go to work, but give us again some feedback that they want to go further. And then in that point, we evolve our product and we provide them a bicycle. So they still have something. We add an engine to the bicycle theoretically, and they are now able to go further, not even in their neighborhood, but maybe in the next city. So at the end, on the fifth iteration, maybe in the fifth month, we give them the car. But even if we give them the car, we may discover that they were happy with the solution that we provided them in the month 3 and in the month 4. So as I said, I hope it's not needed to convince you how Agile works, how iteration works, but the point is that we are aiming business agility, and this business agility to deliver values to the customers frequently, because we want their feedback frequently, and we want to adjust the whole process. So in all this, because of this, this was just to set the grounds for the Agile, and with that, what we are talking about. We want to talk about the risks and how does Agile address risks. On the slide, you can see that there are 3 basic things that a risk is addressed. Because from one side, the Agile frameworks, all of them, they believe in transparency, so they expose everything that we are doing. So the risk could be seen easier. From another side, they believe in collaborative planning, and with the knowledge of the whole team, with the transparency that we have, and having this collaborative planning, we also could see more risks than usual. And the third important thing is that with the customer involvement, we mitigate customer risk by involving them through the life cycle. Because if you remember, here in the beginning, if here we do not have any customer feedback, we all know there through internet beautiful pictures with what customer requested, what the sales manager understood, then what was passed to the development team, and there is a picture with the tree, how they maybe requested from us to have a tree, but then we understood something completely different. And going through the different teams, through the different analysis, and through the half of the company, we at the end deliver to the customer something very different and in a long time of period. And meanwhile, the customer expectations are there, but we at the end cannot meet them as they want. So again, to talk about the risk, having the waterfall, having released everything at the end of the project, is itself a risk, because we do not have from one side this customer feedback that we are talking all of the time, because the idea of the agility is really to bring the customers, to bring the business team, to bring the development teams to work together, and on an often base to have this feedback and these discussions, what could be potentially valuable for them. And on another side, we have the Agile, where we imagine that we provide incrementally, very often, something that it works, something valuable for the customer, so they can test it, and they can have value every time, not at the end. So they can, maybe if they ask us to deliver a website that it will be selling watches, probably in the beginning, we can deliver something that shows only watches. So even if they don't sell watches, they probably could start campaigns for brand awareness or something. So they can have values on earlier stage, not in a year or two, as it was before. And I've been really working in projects where we were delivering solutions to the customers in 2-3 years. So it was like really big bang situation where everybody were frightened what will happen, what will be the feedback if we deliver the right solution, but not anymore. Working in those smaller iterations and discussing the feedback on a regular basis with them. So a risk is an uncertain event that will impact your chosen path, and should it be realized. Usually risks, there are 4 stages of the risk. So first we identify the risk, then we assess a risk, then we need to respond to it, and at some point we need to review the risk to check in if it's still there or we can forget about it. So very quickly, I have here 4 slides for the 4 stages, but then I want us to discuss more concretely where in the Agile framework we can occur risk and what type of tools and techniques we can use. So the first step, when we identify risk, we can use different techniques to identify the potential risk. So here on the left, you can see a hint that identifying risk could happen in a requirements workshop, for example, with the clients, or during a planning poker, because then we're discussing some functionalities, we're giving our estimations, and sometimes when the estimations are really different between the different team members, we see that we have a risk that people probably do not understand what they are doing. Or during the sprint planning, or during the daily scrum, or during the sprint review and sprint retrospective. So all those meetings can be used to identify risk, and they are naturally used to do that. When we identify the risk, we should analyze it. So there is categorization that could be used, and it could be, the risk could be business risk, technological risk, or logistical risk. There is also a famous popular categorization. It is called PESTLE. You can see here: political, environmental, social, technological, legal, or economic risk. But again, everything should be adapted to your environment, because sometimes for you political risks will never occur, or environmental risk will never occur. It depends on the organization that you're working in. A technique that I will show you in these details is risk board, probabilities and impacts, and how to use it. And I also want to show you the Rome methodology, because it's something that it is also lately I observed that it is working well with the teams. But there are also risk burn down charts that could be used. So I will give you the presentation, and in the presentation some of the tools will be clickable, and you can see more details for the tools. When we identify the risk, when we analyze it, then we need to prioritize it and decide an action plan. So this action plan could be different depending of the risk tool that you're using, to manage the risk. As I said, I will show you the Rome tool, for example, what kind of action plans we have, because with this specific Rome tool, we need to decide if we own the risk, if we mitigate the risk, if we accept the risk, what we do with the risk. But the risk needs to be discussed with everyone and accepted, that we will proceed with further plans as it is shown. And then it is at the end, the 4th step is really important also to continuously monitor and follow up to ensure that your action plans are mitigating the risk. So, for example, I told you that at the moment I'm in a team that is leading an agile transformation from Waterfall to SAFE framework, because it's a lot of teams that are forming different teams. And in SAFE, a team of teams is called ART. So there are meetings, general planning meetings, that first we plan the next 3 months with all of the teams on a high level. And then for each iteration in these 3 months, they have the 4 or 5 iteration in the 3 months. Each team is also locally having their own PI planning, their own planning. But during the high-level planning, we're discussing all of the risks. And then during the 3 months, the facilitator of the teams, it's called a release train engineer, he's regularly checking in with all of the teams, with all of the facilitators and product owners, what's going on with the risks, and if they follow up, not to make sure that the risks are not just forgotten, and if they occur, we're not prepared for that. So the follow-up, the checking in is also important, not to forget about it. So in the predictive projects, in the waterfall, this is often done during the project setup and updated on an ongoing basis during the entire project life cycle. But we, in general, think about the risks and probably create a risk list, checklist, or I don't know, it depends again on which tool you're using for project management. You're thinking about the risks in the beginning, but in the agile projects and product management, these steps are performed at least once for each iteration or sprint and updated during the development cycle. So we talk about risks all the time. So let's concretely now talk about the events in the agile environment. As I said, it is not needed for you to work in Scrum to have a daily stand-up, because sometimes Kanban teams, they also have daily stand-ups. So what do you think, how we discuss the risk during the daily stand-up? Do you have an idea? So what is the goal of the daily stand-up? What are the questions that we're answering during the daily stand-up? So during the daily stand-up, the team manages the risk in terms of reaching the sprint goal. So if you remember, we are answering the questions, what I've been doing yesterday in terms of for me to meet the sprint goal, or what am I doing today in order to meet the sprint goal, or if I have any blockers to meet the sprint goal. We're not talking about any more concrete user stories from the last update of the sprint Scrum guide, but we're now talking about sprint goals. So we are somehow managing the risk when we are talking about the sprint goal every day on the daily Scrum. So in theory, we talk about the risk every 24 hours. What about the sprint planning then? The sprint planning, you create a forecast, sprint backlog, and a sprint goal, and all about uncertainty and the risk. So during the sprint planning, you also discuss uncertainties and some risk that may occur. So when creating the sprint backlog and sizing the product backlog items, you're evaluating risk as part of this discussion. So on the sprint planning meeting, again, we have the focus on the risk to talk about. We have more meetings, more events that we can say that we are talking about the risk. The product backlog refinement. So the product backlog refinement naturally discuss the risks that we occur. On the product backlog refinement, we are talking about what is risky, what we don't know about this functionality that we want to develop. Can we keep it? Should we proceed with that? So we're again discussing somehow the risks that may occur by developing something specific. And here for the product backlog refinement, one tip from me is that you guys is good to have the definition of ready. So during the refinement meetings, your user stories needs to meet definition of ready, which means that the concrete user story or ticket, could be technical story as well, is ready for planning. So it's like a checklist that you need to meet, like it was already discussed, it is sized, it has designs, or it has wireframes. So it's like a checklist that it is created by the team to make sure that you have good quality of the stories that you're preparing in the refinement meeting for the next planning or two. The sprint review is also a good occasion to discuss business and technology risk while debating the current increment and prospects. Why? Because we meet our stakeholders, we meet our customers. Sometimes in some companies it is not the case that we are meeting directly customers, but maybe we are meeting customer-facing people or other stakeholders in the company that are defending the business. So we can also get feedback from them and minimize the risk of building specifications for the next iteration, that some additional things that needs to be developed and can mitigate this business or technological risk. Sometimes we see on these meetings team leads or technical leads to be present to push in the direction that the teams do not focus only on functionalities, but they also focus on technical enablers or refinements or refactoring of the code. So we have a quality and stable product. So sprint review is also a good meeting to discuss the risk. On the sprint retro, on the retrospective meeting, we mainly in the team, it's a close meeting, as you know. We can discuss how to improve the Scrum process or the Kanban process, because again, I repeat, it's not needed to be only Scrum team to have a retrospective meeting. Sometimes different teams, they have just a regular basis retrospective meetings to understand how to improve their process and to reduce the risk in terms of people, of technology, of processes. Here is also mentioned definition of done, but I have a separate slide for that. Because it's also important. And last but not least, the sprint itself could be discussed, the length of the sprint, because sometimes the length of the sprint is also something that might help to have a high risk. So we often hear that recommendation for sprint length is 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but we should not get wild and have sprints of 4, 5, 6 weeks, because it's just maybe going back to the old waterfall process, and it's not anymore on small iterations with fast learning, fast feedback, fast implementation. So it is important, the length of the sprint also, to be limited to limit the risk from this side as well. So we mentioned several times early feedbacks. We mentioned joint business and IT teams. Business people should work with the IT teams. But also I wanted to mention to you that pair programming is also, or testing, are also helping to reduce some technical risks that we have in the teams, maybe when we have newcomers or when we have people that are not so involved in some parts of the code. And this can increase the quality and reduce the risk of the code. But other tools and techniques, but of course you cannot limit to this list. Probably you have experience with other techniques, is for example the risk burn down chart that it is created from Mike Cohen, which is also interesting tool, or risk register or log, or risk modified Kanban board, or risk probability and impact matrix that I told you that it is quite helpful lately, prioritizing backlogs based on value and risks, and all of the meetings that we just mentioned before this slide are also helping to identify the risk. So those tools is just a list that you can maybe explore in details to see what will help you the best, because as you know, Scrum or Agile is not a silver bullet. You need to understand what works for you and your teams. But I wanted to show you this probability and impact matrix because it's an easy tool, and you can quickly implement it in your teams. So the idea is that you're drawing this probability vertical and horizontal impact line. And when you are discussing some risks, you're putting them on a sticky note, and you decide where to put them in this graph here. Is it not a lot of impact, but a lot of probability to happen, like the red one here on the top? Or the risk that you're discussing, probably it is not, will not happen. The chance to happen is really low, but the impact will be very big. Or the probability is really high and the impact will be high. So when you discuss the different risks, you should agree with your teams where to put exactly the sticky note between those two lines. And then on the top right corner, when you draw a circle, you will discover the most important risks that needs to be discussed in details, prioritized, and decided what you guys need to what kind of actions you need to have in mind if those risks occur, because they are the most important risks. So this is really easy tool. And when you have the backlog with the most important risks on the top right, as it is shown here, you can decide in which of the 4 categories you can put the risk. So should you avoid the risk, to replan, to release, so the risk never occurs? Or you should transfer to outsource the risk to someone better able to address it. So you can try to find help from outside. Or you should accept it, recognize that we have done as much as we can do to address the risk, but there is nothing else that you can do at the moment. So you basically accept that if the risk appears, nothing can be done, and just the program, the situation is at risk. Or you can mitigate it, to replan the release to reduce the impact and or probability of the risk. So you basically are building a plan, what you will do, what kind of steps you will have when the risk occurs. So those risks on the top right needs to be detailed, discussed, and to be decided in which of those 4 sections each one of the risks could go. So we have all of the risks discussed and assigned to a specific category. This is a really easy technique. And do you guys have any experience with it? I unfortunately don't see. Maybe if you are sending me messages in the chat, I do not see it, but maybe no. Okay, so let's continue then. The other technique that I wanted to show you, it is really also very important, and I observed lately in the teams that it's working. It's again, when we have a list of risks, it is called roaming risk technique. It is coming from the SAFE framework, which is a framework for teams of teams, but you can also explore it a little bit, and you can maybe adjust and adapt it a little bit for just a small team, or if you are still having teams of teams, you can implement it there. It is again, when you have the list, when you have this list of these risks, you need to discuss them one by one, but quickly. In which category you can put them. So here the categories again are 4, quite similar, by the way. So the first category is resolved. So the risk has been addressed, no longer a concern. So imagine that during a planning, you see a risk, but till the end of the planning, it is already discussed and resolved. So in the beginning of the planning was a risk, but at the end it's not a risk anymore, because maybe at some point during the planning we find a solution. So we can resolve it. The second one is owned, the second category. So someone has taken the responsibility. So at the moment, we do not see a solution. We don't know how to resolve it at the moment, but someone is assigned, someone owns the risk and has the responsibility to follow up for this risk, maybe to decide an action plan or to resolve it, or to follow up on this risk, to make sure that it is not we do not forget about it, and someone is taking care how we react when we have it. The third one is mitigated. If we go to the clock down, so that again the team has a plan how to proceed when the risk occurs. So during maybe the planning again, if we see this risk, but we discuss it a little bit and we create an action plan, what we can do. This risk is coming into the mitigated area. And then the accepted one, like the previous two, nothing we can do more. It's just that we accept that everything could be compromised if this risk occurs. We agree that we cannot do anything else. So this technique is also an easy one to be implemented, and it gives good results, at least from my observations. I am going progressively on the slides because we have just 15 more minutes. So who should manage the risk in Agile? What do you think? If we compare with the waterfall projects before, with the waterfall methodology, it was more like the project manager staying in front of everything, in front of the project plan, in front of the risk plan, taking care and responsibility of all of this. But in Agile, we say that everyone should be responsible to manage the risk. Of course, as we said, we have people that are facilitating, like in the teams, we have Scrum Masters that are facilitating, so they're constantly checking with the team if there are impediments that could be resolved, if they see any risks, or if they see some blockers to the team. So the Scrum Master facilitating and teaching the team that they need to talk about this if something occurs. But on a scaled level, we have release train engineers in SAFe, or we have super Scrum Masters in Scrum of Scrum framework. So we have some people asking those questions, but in general, all of us are responsible to talk about the risk during the whole process. Some tips and tricks that I wanted to give you, which are from my latest experience with a lot of teams, working with really a lot of teams, cross-located, having difficult plannings now in the online environment. If you guys have planning, if you have teams of teams, and if you have this collaborative planning event where you're planning more or less on a high level, some work that needs to be done in few months, 2-3 months. For these high level plannings, do not push the people to plan on their 100% of capacity, because they really probably plan from the perspective that their plans are on a high level. Usually, if we have this kind of high-level plannings with a lot of teams, then they have their own local team plannings where they can refine completely, discuss completely all of the user stories, and then they can commit on 100% of the capacity that they have. But this is just a tip. If you have these high-level plannings, do not push them to be really detailed on this high-level planning, but maybe on around 80%, which means no buffer that it is left for the managers to add more functionalities, but this buffer is for the teams just to have their local plannings more in details. Even if I do not imagine that all of us are working in companies that they have just one team, or if you have multiple teams, all of the teams are super independent and they are having only their piece of code that they need to develop. So usually teams, they have dependencies between them. So even if it is not under a specific agile scaled framework, I guess probably you try to have collaborative planning event. So tip here is maybe to make it first visual, and to be more transparent, and to on this visualization to show what are the main functionalities that team are doing and what are the dependencies between the teams. So in this case, this picture comes again from SAFe, which is for a lot of teams, but it could be really implemented in the different organizations without implementing the SAFe framework, but just to have this visual representation of what are the teams doing at the moment, what kind of functionalities, and if they have dependencies, what are the dependencies between them. Because on a regular basis, will be important to check in those dependencies if they're happening on time. Because, for example, You can see here on the first one, the team 1 in iteration 3, sprint 3, for example, they need to deliver something. But before that, there is something that needs to be delivered from team 2 in the previous sprint. And in the first sprint, other 3 teams, they need to deliver something even before that. So this dependency, this critical path needs to be checked on a regular basis to see what is going on. So in this way you can mitigate a little bit the risk of delays, or someone is not doing something on time, or dependencies are not taken into an account between the teams. So it's during this collaborative planning, it's a recommendation to have something like that. And also another tip is about the effective prioritization. So it is really important to really think from the perspective of the customers and what is the business value that we want to deliver to them, because sometimes it's really tempting to give something to the teams to develop because it is easy or because it is fun, but if there is no value to the customer, it means that we are risking again a lot, because at the end we need money from the customers. We need to bring them value, so they have some money, so they pay us again. They pay us as well. So it is really important to prioritize the most important things, the things that are with the biggest business value for the customer, to be done first. So the prioritization is also something very important, and it is a key software development risk when we deliver something that it is not valuable for the customers from this perspective. And how agile transparency reduces project risks. Again, the transparency here, this slide is just to mirror back again and to remind you that the transparency is built on the agile values and principles. So you can see on the right all the values that individuals and interactions over processes and tool, working software, over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration, or contract negotiation. Everything is built on transparency. And in Scrum, one of the most popular frameworks for Agile, transparency is one of the 3 pillars, along with the inspection and adaptation. If you remember, inspect, adapt, and transparency is also really important. But I think the transparency, we discussed it already several times, but it's something which is really, really important. And because we were talking a lot about Scrum teams, if occurs that you guys are dealing with Kanban teams or teams that are not working in iterations, but they have just a backlog that needs to be executed, that needs to be done, make sure that you introduce limits for work in progress. Because the idea is not that we have a team of 10 people that they can start 20 tickets, but the idea is that when we start something, we accomplish it. We move it through the flow from left to right. So we don't want for those 20 tickets to be stuck in the column development and still starting more and more new development, but never accomplish something, never having something to the definition of done. So the idea is that having this work in progress limits, as you can see here, each column has a number. This is the work in progress limit. So when we see that in the acceptance criteria, for example, column, we have 2 tickets, we cannot move more tickets there. So from the developers, they cannot move 1 more ticket in the acceptance criteria before we clear a space here. So one of those tickets needs to move to done. So this way we push a little bit the teams to accomplish work, not only starting but accomplishing. So it is really important. And this is also from the perspective of the features prioritization, because when we are talking about some functionalities that we want to do, probably we have Kanban boards to organize and prioritize these, to analyze them, to put them for development, and then cascade them to some teams. But yeah, for all of the Kanban boards, take in mind that you can put work in progress to limit the risk of not completing anything, to secure that you complete stuff. And I do not remember, is it the last one? The definition of done is also very, very important tip that I want to give you. So the definition of done could be on different levels. So here I'm talking about 2 levels, because I don't know what kind of levels do you guys have, but the minimum 2 levels that all of us have for sure is that we need a definition of done on a team level and definition of done on a release level. So what for us means that if someone in the team says that something is done, what does it mean for us? So it is important with all of the teams to discuss this definition of done. And when we say that something is done, what does it mean for us? So it would mean that the system is working, no remaining work for this ticket, everyone on the same page regarding what was completed, work accepted by the product owner, maybe code review has been done. So we need something like a checklist. What does it mean done for us? And because sometimes when something is done, it is not immediately released to production. Sometimes we have some limitations in terms of releases. Sometimes we need to wait for weeks. It depends of the structure really of the company that we're working for. So also it is important to have definition of done for the releases. So when we release something on production, we all know what does it mean. Like the code is working on production, the code is verified from the product owner or from the product manager, the documentation, customer documentation is done, things like that. Again, like a small checklist that we all know what does it mean when we say that something is released on production. So between those 2 definitions of done, I personally use templates, but every time all of them are discussed with the concrete teams, with the release management team, with the concrete Scrum, Kanban teams. But between those 2 definitions, it's also possible to have other type of definitions depending of your structure. You can think about that as well. So this was my last slide. In theory, when we have more time, or if it was a real meetup on face-to-face, we could have a game, but it could be done with all kinds of games. Here the idea was that it doesn't matter what we're doing, it doesn't matter what kind of game we are doing. It should be something that it is in iterations, so a game that it could repeat twice or 3 times. But after each iteration, you can practice this crisp probability and impact matrix. So you can, guys, maybe practice with your teams. It really doesn't matter what kind of game you propose them to do. It is just important to have something that you can do 2-3 times. And after each iteration, like a small retrospective meeting, they can draw this probability and impact matrix and decide what are the risks, what they can improve in their process, what is the most important things that they want to discuss, and then implement them in the second round of the game. So it is just an idea for you what could practice if you have training classes or practice classes with your teams.
We have a question.
Sure. Let me.
Can you see on your screen?
Yes, give me a second. Stop sharing. On my 2 questions. One is shown on the screen. Okay. Comparing waterfall iteration on delivery after a year versus if we deliver 4 or 5 weeks iteration to customer and deliver an MVP, is that a good idea? Yes. So this is exactly the slides that I was presenting in the beginning. Let me quickly show them again. So the whole idea is that we are not anymore waiting in years to show something to the customer, because now the customers from one side cannot wait so long time. So here in the case of the car, again, in your case, maybe in 1 year they will receive their car, but The problem is that from one side, customers are not so patient at the moment, and from another side, you don't give them any valuable product, anything that they can use. So it's better to understand really what is the MVP. There are also exercises for the minimum viable product, and really by smaller iterations to give them the product so you can get the feedback from them and mitigate this risk with the unknown expectations in a year. So from this perspective, you're mitigating the risk, and it is really recommended to work in smaller iterations. And even 5 weeks of iterations is a big iteration. I know that a lot of people they're telling me, yes, but just 2 or 3 weeks, it's too much overhead to plan. But when we are used to this process, we see that we do not plan so much in detail, so we're not spending time for future plans that they never may occur, because we get some feedback from the customer in 3 weeks. So little by little, having these smaller iterations and talks with our customers or customer-facing people will help us to mitigate the risk of the outcome. What do you think if one risk can create an opportunity? What do you mean? I do not understand. Can we elaborate more on this question? But for the previous one, is it okay? I guess for the previous one is okay. So who is responsible for managing risk log? So in Agile, risk log is just a technique. All of those techniques the facilitator could facilitate them for you, or of course a product owner could initiate. But if you have something like a risk log, maybe on the daily stand-up, you can check against the risk log if there is something or a weekly basis. So there is no strict rule about that. It's just, again, in the team to agree how often to check in if you have specific risk log, or if you could put some alarms for the risks when they appear. But it's again a discussion in the team. Nobody is really responsible. It should be agreed in the team who will do it. What do you think if one risk can create? So what about this? One risk can create an opportunity. What do you mean? Generally, it is perceived as a negative aspect. Still do not understand. What do you mean exactly? Opportunity for what?
Maybe he want to say that if you take a risk, that can create an opportunity and can be positive risk rather be a negative risk, because risk can be positive.
Risk can be positive, yes. We were discussing more from the perspective of negative risks. So if it is a positive risk, it's more or less an opportunity. It's not a risk anymore. So if it is an opportunity, that's why we have these small iterations where we can see what are the next best opportunities for us. That's why we say that we do not have this 1 year plan in details now, because appearing opportunities, when opportunities appear, we have people prioritizing what needs to be done, so they can decide that those opportunities could be taken into an account. So there are not any more risks, but could be planned for the close future. Example: any uncertain situation that may occur could potentially help companies to innovate the solution and add value. Yes, for sure. For sure, we can expect unexpected sometimes, but in general, we try to have stable vision and stable backlog, but not with a lot of details. So if something occurs that potentially could as you say, help companies to innovate the solution and add value, they immediately should be taken into account. And again, we go back to the slide with the prioritization. So if we see such an opportunity, we need to make sure that prioritization works good in our case. The prioritization, it is not just because we think what might be the business need in our field, but also needs concrete numbers like what is the cost, what is the value to the customer that we're delivering, what is the cost that we need to pay, what is the risk of delay if we are delaying this type of functionality. So there are different prioritization techniques that could also have the risk and these new opportunities in the formula. So prioritization is really important to be there. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I would like to thank Miss Diana for this wonderful talk and walking us through the whole Scrum life cycle and on each stage how to keep in mind and keep a note of the risks that are there and to make a collaborative effort between all the members like Scrum Master, Product Owner, and the Scrum team to effectively and efficiently um, address risks. Thank you, Miss Diana, for this wonderful talk. And
Just can I add something? I thank you so much for the invitation, and do not forget that even if this is not a Scrum that you're working in, if it is only a Agile project management, you can also adopt some practices and
right,
value from the tips. It's really not only for the Scrums, or even if you don't have all of the events adapted, maybe some of them or some techniques that you can use could also help you. Doesn't matter of the framework. So it was a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you
thank
for the
you.
invitation.
Hey, thank you.
And I will send you the presentation if you guys want to use it. I don't mind to share with you.
Oh, please do that kindly. Thank. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.